Welcome to Career Tools. Today's topic, answering questions about your GPA. Here we go. In the first 5 or so years out of college, and for some longer than that, one of the first questions one is asked in an interview is, what is your GPA? Now, that's an easy enough question if you're proud of your achievement. But unfortunately, some folks aren't so proud of their achievement. And we get this question either in the discussion forums or somebody writing us an email all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, it's interesting because it's not as often in the discussion forums because people are embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
And so they send us an email.
Yeah, there's an underlying theme about the questions we get asked regarding this. I'll talk about it in a minute. This question really bothers me when people want to know how to handle it.
Yeah. Some folks didn't do as well as they hoped, or circumstances conspired against them and somehow made it more difficult for them to study. Or, they discovered that they weren't mature enough or interested enough in the topic and slacked off a little bit. So there's a myriad of reasons why people run into this particular problem and don't do as well in their university classes as they would like to. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how to handle that. And we have some ideas.
Yeah, really simple structure to this cast. Point 1 is answer the question. Folks, don't miss this. Answer the question. It's an easy question once you think about it. Not feel about it, but think about it. It's easy. Number 2, if you're allowed to elaborate after you've answered the question. And then point 3, GPA really does matter to recruiters. Okay. Now that said, before I get into answering the question, I want to elaborate upon my comment earlier that there's a theme that bothers us about this question. Okay. For some reason, this is one of those questions. There are a whole series of them, about how do I talk about how I was fired and what if I got laid off and what if I took a cut in pay and so on. Interviewing, unfortunately, for many people is by definition a gray area where suddenly it's like we're advertising and we're marketing and we can bend the truth. Some of you know I like to play golf and, no one ever says on a golf ball commercial, this ball goes farther than any other ball on tour or off of your club, right? Why do they say that? Because I think it's actually illegal to say that. It may not technically be illegal, but the fact is, in addition, it's not true, okay? Because there are standards and everybody's trying to make their ball go as far as the standards will allow, but the standards are pretty strict based on what the Royal and Ancient and the USGA set up. The point is, what they say is no ball is longer. And that is allowed, because it's technically true, it's allowed to lead people to believe who aren't discerning that that's actually means they're the longest ball, longest hit golf ball if you hit it the same way. So in a way, it is designed to say X and to be truthful, while also in a way misleading and give you the impression of Y, something different. And we see this with these series of questions, or not series of questions, but these types of questions, and GPA is one of them. Folks, if you're asked a question that has a factual answer, you're obligated in an interview to give a factual answer. Let me take that back. You're not obligated. If you're going to tell people that we advised you, you're obligated to do so. Okay. If you don't, if you give an answer that is not factual, when in fact a fact is what is called for, and a fact would be how old are you, and what is your cell phone number, or what is your email address? If you mislead on those questions, even if the information is more helpful or less helpful, it doesn't matter. You've misled on purpose in order to gain, which is prevarication or, a lack of honesty, a lack of ethics. The fact that people ask us, how do I answer what was your GPA, stuns me. It's like saying, what color are your eyes? Or what size are your feet? What size shoes do you wear? This is not a matter of how can I make this sound good? Okay. If somebody asks me my weight, I might like the fact that I'm overweight and I might think to myself, well, gosh, it's going to be embarrassing. And the fact is, the interviewer is in charge. They've asked you a factual question, and you are obligated, if you're an ethical person, to respond in a factual way. Okay. Now, they should not. Asking your weight is technically illegal, at least in the U.S. for many, many jobs. So the point here is, if you're thinking, I really want to know this, I really want to know how they're going to tell me how to handle my GPA. GPA doesn't need to be handled, folks. Your GPA is what your GPA is. Okay. It's like being asked your middle name. It's not a matter of what middle name might make me sound good. Is there a bias against various middle names of different ethnic or religious or gender background? It's irrelevant. The question is, what is your middle name? Just like, what is your GPA? And that's why we start with answer the question. I'm going to say this one more time. If you are hanging on our every word right now, finally, they're going to tell me how to handle this question. You're going to be disappointed, but you're going to learn the right answer. Okay. There is no spinning this answer.
So when you say answer the question, I mean, what do you mean by it? It sounds like a pretty simple answer, right? It sounds like 3.2.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you mean?
Look, yeah, in fact, people say, how do I answer the question, what is your GPA? I say, you string some numbers together. I mean, and in the U.S., you have a decimal point. Now, look, just to do a brief mention for, we know that GPAs, grade point averages, the numeric evaluation of your quality and quantity of your studies in school. We know it's different in different places. In the U.S., GPA stands for grade point average. It's the measure of how well you did. 4.0, there are exceptions where you can get above a 4.0 in certain special classes, and if you're at the top of your class and so on. But generally speaking, a 4 is all A's, a 3 is all B's, and a 2 is all C's. If you don't know this and you're in Europe or somewhere else in the world, if someone tells you that a 4.0 in college, that's really good. It's it's also known as straight A's. Some people in the U.S. call it a 4-point as opposed to a 4.0 or a 4.0. It's nothing but A's. Pretty hard to get in most colleges, particularly in a college that has a national reputation. Generally speaking in the U.S., just so you know, a 3.0 is considered the beginning of a dividing line. If you got below a 3.0 in college, sometimes it'll raise an eyebrow. A 2.0 is a cause for concern from college, particularly if you're studying a field that requires some rigor that will be applied after school. I'm thinking about math and science and so on, where you learned a specific technical skill or an actual skill that is going to be applied the same way you applied it in school. I'm not saying that analyzing literature is not a skill. It absolutely is. It's one I'm not very good at. And the likelihood of someone doing right out of college what they did in college in the courses they took to get a degree in literature analysis are probably pretty small. On the other hand, when you're hired as an engineer, you're going to be doing engineering stuff, and they taught you the stuff you're supposed to know how to do. So 2.0 is very low. It's a C, it's straight C's, and C's are in under college or below college grades. A C is considered average, a B is above average, and 4 is often referred to as excellent. So if you hear somebody say a 3.5, that's really good in college in the U.S., generally speaking. A 3.0, if you tell a recruiter, you say, I have a 3.0, unless they're recruiting for very unusual positions, a 3.0, they check it in their head and they're done. If you're sitting here wondering, how do I handle pitching my 3.1 in an interview? Just forget about it. You are worried about the wrong thing. Say 3.1 and be done with it. We do know, though, in Europe, different points and scale systems are used. It's different everywhere, but we can say that the one other place we know, we have a lot of listeners in the UK, the designations are first or 2.1 or 2.2, and third are used. In Asia, some universities follow the US system. Some use different systems. We're going to talk about the U.S. system here. In the U.K., if someone says they got a first, that's roughly the equivalent of a 4.0 or top of the class, and it's highly regarded. Wendy shared with us before this cast that someone who got a 2.1 or who got a second, a 2, and then a 1 did well. And generally, the 2.2 is a bit like a C or a 3 or a 2.0 in the U.S. and is cause for concerns. And there's also something called a third, which is even lower than that, not to be respected terribly much. Again, we're going to use the U.S. GPA system, but the basic principles apply here. We're going to use examples from the U.S. because those roll easily off our tongues. But whatever system you have, the core of this cast is whatever you got is what you got. And when they ask you what you got, you tell them what you got. There is no spinning. There is no ball is longer. There just is the number or the statement, which comes probably directly off of your transcript. The most common mistake we see when interviewees are asked, what is your GPA, is an answer that begins, and I know many of you have heard me talk about this, particularly those of you who've got the interview series, which is one of the most surprising products we've ever put out. Thousands of people have bought it, and we continue to get emails from people saying it changed my life, got me the job I wanted to get, and so on. And I've said often, any yes or no question, or what I call a digital question that requires a digital answer, either to say yes or no, or a digit, a number, any answer to that question, which begins with well, indicates that the well is the preface to a story. And if I ask you, how many apples do I have in my hand? Your answer ought not to be a story about the apples. It simply ought to be a counting of the apples. And in fact, it's worse than a story, right, Mike? I mean, when we say, what's your GPA? And somebody says, well, we don't assume they're going to tell us a story about how they got a 4.0, right?
No.
They're going to tell us about the low marks they got, right? The difficulties they had, the poor professors, the bad choice of subject.
The excuses. It'll be all about excuses.
Yeah. Now, look, I had one person say, look, my parents died. Okay. And one of the points of this cast is the correct answer to the question is the number, and then followed by, unfortunately, I had a rough time, and I took 5 years because in year 2, my parents died. And I was very direct and clear with him. I said, look, that's going to hurt you. And you're going to be given a pass to some degree. And you can't start your answer with the story about your parents. You have to answer the question. Because when you answer first with the story, you're doing two things. You're telegraphing that your answer is not going to be good. And you're telling the recruiter that what you want them to know is more important than what they want to know. They will then worry about that for the rest of the interview. They will then spend all of their time crafting very careful questions designed to allow you not to wiggle out of, and therefore listen much harder to your answers, give you much less room to breathe, and inevitably be looking for you to misstep for the rest of the interview. And it's a terribly, terribly wrong thing to do. So let's just be real simple and say there is only one answer to the question, what is your GPA? And that is a number. Or if you'd like, it's two numbers separated by a decimal point, a dot or a point, however you want. 3.2, that is two numbers and the word point. Or 3.4, that's two numbers, two numerals with the word dot in between them. Okay. Even if it is 1.0, it is what you got, and you have to be able to say that number 1.0. Again, recruiters are going to get frustrated. They're asking a simple question. They have their pen poised over a box where they just want to write a number and get on with it. Yeah, they're going to draw a conclusion, but if we haven't figured out yet that they're going to draw a conclusion on everything we say and the matching of our tie and our shirt and our coat, which if you're a little bit colorblind, probably won't help you any either, but you won't walk in and say immediately, I'm colorblind, right? They're going to get frustrated if you don't answer the question. And there is something to be said. Recruiters love people who are candid, even when it's painful. In fact, candor is, about that, right? My dad told me once, good manners is using them when no one's around, right? It's using the butter knife when no one else is looking, when you're eating alone, right? So ethics means telling the truth, even if it hurts. Not because it hurts or not because it's technically true. It's because it's simply the right thing to do.
Is a low GPA as bad as everybody thinks it is? Why do they want to know the GPA, and how bad is it really for us if we have a low GPA?
Yeah, the first thing we need to know is that, let's be clear about something, folks. GPA is relevant. There are a lot of people who are saying it's not, and they often give anecdotes of people with a 1.0, which I will share with you in just a moment. I'm sorry, not a 1.0, but a very low GPA of someone who succeeded. And there are certainly studies that show the GPA is not as perfectly aligned as some people might like, but there is no perfect alignment between past and future. There's none, right? But there are several reasons. The first is it's just part of the fact gathering. Interviewing is finding out about a person, what work experience they have, what skills they have, how well they articulate themselves, how they've reacted to certain situations, and an attempt to understand how well they'll do in a particular situation, right? To a certain extent, this isn't even